bound to convince companies to continue hiring at anything like the rate seen in May. May is usually a month of job creation across most industrial economies. Job creation is running at the highest rate for 4 years. Employers remain upbeat about business outlook, especially in manufacturing, where the euro appears to be helping drive strong export sales, but there are worrying signs of confidence warning in the service sector compared to the wave of optimism seen earlier this year. The survey brought some encouraging news to the region, though by many to be facing the potential threat of deflation, with price pressures picking up to 3-year highs. Inflation should turn positive in the coming years. The German economy suggests that Germany's economy is on course for expansion of 0.4% in Q2. France is likely to struggle to see 0.3%. However, outside of these two core countries, where the main activity appears to be, the rest of the region is enjoying the best quarter of economic growth and job creation for almost 8 years. Now let's go to the U.S. The PMI eases to 16-month low in May. Key points here: U.S. Manufacturing output growth will weaken for the second month running in May. Slowest growth in new orders since January of 2014. Robust pace of job creation remains. And if we look at 53.8% in May, the seasonally adjusted there, it fell from 54.1 in April, signaled the weakest improvement in overall business conditions since 2014. Slower new order growth was a key factor weighing down the headline index in May, while faster job creation was the main positive development since previous week. The latest data indicates that overall new business growth softened for the second month running and was the weakest since January 2014. Moreover, new export sales decreased marginally in May, with a number of manufacturers noting the dollar had a negative influence on competitiveness in external markets in terms of domestic demand, whereas the euro was a positive one. Respondents noted that the energy sector investment spending remained a key area in weakness. Petrol gasoline prices, incidentally, up. We'll get to that shortly. Manufacturing output growth eased from the March 6-month high, while firms largely attributed to soft new business gains. The latest increase in output volume was the slowest recorded so far in 2015. Meanwhile, the latest data signal a slowing pace of backlog accumulation across the manufacturing sector for 4 months. The lower pressure on operating capacity was linked to a combination of weak new business gains and robust job creation. Higher levels of manufacturing employment have been record in each month since July of 2013. The latest upturn in payroll numbers was the fastest for 6 months, while firms attributed to the launch of new products, long-term investment plans, and efforts to boost production volumes. Suppliers' delivery time lengthened in May, although the latest deterioration in vendor performance was much less marked than February's recent low. There were reports that some suppliers' bottlenecks had persisted after the port strikes that was on the West Coast earlier the year. There, however, the latest survey indicates a slow rise in pre-production inventories for 11 months, suggesting a lower propensity amongst manufacturers to build safe stock in May. On the pricing front, manufacturers indicated an increase in their average cost burdens, and this is something we saw in Germany and elsewhere. the first since December of 2014. That said, the rate of inflation was only marginal, with survey respondents noting that low oil prices continue to reduce cost pressures. Meanwhile, manufacturing gate changes rose at the most marked pace for 6 months, but the rate of inflation remains subdued. Here, this is from Dr. Williamson. Manufacturers report their weakest growth since the start of 2014 in May, with the survey results adding to fears that the strong dollar is weighing down the U.S. economy, hitting corporate earnings. Although falling only marginally, export sales have have dropped for 2 straight months. Sometimes something not seen for 2 years. A far cry from the solid export performance seen this time last year, that was in 2014. Overall, book orders are consequently growing at the slowest rate there. Weaker book orders tendencies don't appear to affect hiring, at least not yet, with jobs creation picking up. However, unless production growth revises, there is a worry that the payroll growth will slow as companies seek to boost productivity. Big argument over productivity slacking the economy. Higher oil prices are meanwhile pushing up firms' input costs for the first time so far this year. However, there are a few signals of any substantial upturn in inflation. Well, that can change. Despite signs of price pressure pickup, the survey is likely to encourage policymakers to err on the side of caution, and this is what we'll hear from the Fed, especially in relation to any further damaging impact of a strong dollar on growth and earnings if policies were to be tightening. The decision hiking interest rates is therefore likely to be put off until late in the year. And that does that part of it there. Let's go to the Fed itself, and this is Dr. Janice Yellen in Providence, Ohio. Providence, Rhode Island, excuse me. As soon as we can get there. We'll skip through some of this. Obviously, it's a very long speech, and it was not there. The recession and recovery so far. This is on the 22nd of May before the Chamber of Commerce there. As all of you know, the economy is still recovering from the Great Recession we call it Depression, the worst downturn since the terrible episode of the 30s, the Depression, the Great Depression, as opposed to the Depression that inspired its name. The recession began more than 7 years ago, the result of a collapse in the housing market. Remember the famous housing bubble, financial crisis, unemployment rate 10% nationally. It reached 11.3% in Rhode Island. Nationally, payroll shrunk 8.5 million. About 6%, and 41,000 jobs lost in Rhode Island, a very small state indeed. Output fell more than 4% nationally, the most since the Great Depression. The Federal Reserve, under its charter, took action to stabilize the financial system during the crisis, and we have supported economic recovery with monetary actions designed to hold down long-term interest rates. With this help, the economy has made significant strides. The pace of job growth has gradually strengthened, and payrolls expanded by more than 3 million in 2014 alone. The unemployment rate has come down to 5.4 in April. One sign of a strong labor market is the number of job openings have risen impressively. Another is that workers are quitting their jobs, signaling a greater confidence in their ability to find a new job. Rhode Island is sharing in this recovery, but I'm aware that economic conditions remain difficult in Rhode Island. The jobless rate has come down in there, 6.3% in March. Unemployment has remained above the national average, and of course above the average in New England. In recent months, some economic data has suggested that the pace of improvement in the economy may have slowed. I will address in a moment. I'm approaching, as I said, because my judgment, we are not there yet, and that's in terms of where the economy should be. Unemployment rate has come down close to levels that economists believe is sustainable in the long run without generating inflation. But unemployment rates today probably does not fully capture the extent of slack in the labor market. She's correct about that. To classify as unemployed, people must report that they are actively seeking work. This is a very, very important point here, and many people without jobs say they are not doing so, that they are classified as being out of work. Most people out of the labor force are there volunteering, including retirees and so forth and so on. Well, that's a kind of a dubious statement. I also believe that a significant number are not seeking work because they still perceive a lack of good job opportunities, no doubt about that. In addition to those discouraged to seek work, an unusually large number of people report they are working part-time because they can't find full-time work. That has been a continual thing. Higher wages raise costs for employers, and of course, but also boosts the spending and confidence of consumers, and would signal strengthening of the recovery that will ultimately be good for business. In the aggregate, the major measurement of hourly compensation rose at a rate of around 2% through most of the recovery. In Rhode Island's average hourly earnings have not risen at all in the past year. The fact that some large corporations, the Targets and Walmarts of the world, have announced increases to their workers also may signal that larger wage gains are on the horizon. That is through struggles out in the city of Chicago, one of the suburbs there. The McDonald's Corporation promised to raise their rate of $1 above whatever the minimum is in a particular state. Now, these were just franchise stores, so the struggle goes on there. For 15, they call it. Now, let's move on down here. My colleagues, this is the Federal Open Market Committee, FOIC, and I believe that the consumer price inflation will move up to 2% as the economy strengthens further, and also temporary factors weighing on inflation recede. A number of economic headwinds have slowed the recovery, and to some extent they continue to influence the outcome. The rise of gas prices will be one of the quote-unquote headwinds that are weighing on a number of economies. The headwinds include, first, the fact that the housing crash left many households with less wealth, in other words, what's commonly referred to as underwater, and higher debts weighing on consumer spending. Many homeowners lost their homes. Many more ended up underwater, owing more on their mortgages than their homes were worth. Economists have noted that areas of the country that saw a large boom and a bust in housing have subsequently fared worse economically than other areas there. Rhode Island is one such place. While the housing bust was not as large here as in Florida, Nevada, and parts of California, a larger than average, and the largest in New England. This fact has contributed to problems, but one has to note that Rhode Island's economy has been weak since the 80s. A second headwind, also quite important here in Rhode Island, has come from changes in fiscal policy to reduce the budget deficit. The federal level, the fiscal stimulus of 2008, 2009 supported economic output, but the effects of that stimulus faded in 2011. Federal fiscal policy actions became a drag